Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, my name is Daniel Aiman bin Nozari. So, my student ID is 20139281, and I am from program UR65230008. So, today's presentation will be assignment 3. So, my lecturer name is Dr. Amin Nazrin bin Abdul Rahim. So, okay, the question first. The question is draw the output waveform of Q for a negative edge-triggered JK flip-flop with active low CLR bar and PRE bar by using the input waveform in figure 1.1. So from the given figure 1.1, the figure 1.1 consists CLK waveform, J waveform, K waveform, PRE bar waveform, and CLR waveform, CLR bar waveform. So, by referring the question asks us to find the output waveform for Q for a negative edge-triggered JK flip-flop. So, how to find negative edge-triggered JK flip-flop? So, based on the figure 1.1, the negative edge-triggered will be on the back side of CLK waveform. So we will look at the CLK back of CLK waveform. So here will be CLK1, CLK2, CLK3, CLK4, CLK5, and CLK6. So how to know? The question asks us to base on the JK flip-flop. So the JK flip-flop waveform will be has J waveform, K waveform, and clock waveform. So here with active low. So active low is consists pre-bar and CR bar. So here will be assume PRE bar as set and CLR bar as reset. So first thing first, to create each waveform or Q waveform here, first we will look at the pre-bar. Based on the theory truth table here, if PRE bar equal to 0, so the output will be 1. So here, PRE bar is 0. So the output here will be 1. So the output will continue until clock 1 and we stop here. Then we will look at the CLR bar. Then if CLR bar will be 0 here, CLR bar will be 0. So the output will be 0. So here on the Q waveform will be 0 here. Okay. Then after that, we will look at the J and K waveform based on the CLK negative edge-triggered waveform. Okay. By referring this theory truth table, if J equal to 1 and K is equal to 0, and the output will be 1 here. So here at the Q, the waveform will be continue 1 until clock 2. So it will stop here. Then at clock 2, both J and K is equal to 1. So by referring this truth table, if J and K is equal to 1, it will be toggle. So toggle. So what is toggle? Toggle is the value will be opposite of previous answer, previous value. So if the previous value is 1, so it will be 0. So it will be continue until clock 3. So then the clock 3 here is same with clock 2. So, but because both of its j and k value is equal to 1, so it will be toggle. So the answer will be opposite from previous answer. So if previous answer is 0, so then it will be 1. So the clock tree answer here will be 1, and it will stop here until here because of CL bar. So here will be, for here will be referring the CLR bar 0. So the answer here will be 0, 2. Then we will see at the CLK clock 5 here, still the same, which is J and K is 1, so will be toggle. So it will be opposite from the previous answer. So the previous answer is 0, so here will be 1. Then we will look at the last clock here, clock 6. So still the same. The J and K value here is 1, so it will be toggle. So the answer will be opposite from the previous one. So here will be 0. Okay, so here is question 2. Based on figure 2.1, figure 2.1 is here. Give the complete name for each flip-flop. So here has 4 flip-flop. 1, 2, 3, 4. So for the first flip-flop, its name is SR flip-flop or set reset flip-flop. So for the second flip-flop is T flip-flop, which means toggle flip-flop. And the third is JK flip-flop or JK or Jack Kilby flip-flop, negative edge triggered. Why negative edge triggered? Because it has note here. So for the fourth one is D flip-flop. So it is data flip-flop. So here is question 2.2 Roman. Complete the following timing diagram in figure 2.1. Figure 2.1 is here. By drawing the waveform for the output W, X, Y, and Z. Assume all of the output values are initially at 0. So will be assumed at the early output will be 0. Okay. Then so here is SR flip-flop. So why the answer is here is 0. So the SR flip-flop need to have clock. So the SR flip-flop here doesn't have clock. So then we can refer by the truth table here. If not have clock, so the answer will be 0. So our W here value is 0. Then the connection below this one will be W bar. So the value is 1 because so the W bar here will be 1 because the W is 0. So here is JK flip-flop. So for JK flip-flop, the CLK given here is negative. The CLK given here has note. So it's negative. So we will read the waveform by its back here. Then based on the truth table here, okay, so first we will look here. So here we will assume as 0. So the early output waveform will be 0. Then look at the CLK1. So we will look at the CLK1 here. The J value is 0. Why? So how the value of J is 0? So it is because of the previous W. So here, it has W connection here. Okay. So the output will continue 0. And the K is from the W bar here. So here it is J is equal to 0 and the K is equal to 1. So if the J equal to 0 and K equal to 1, so the answer will be 0, reset. So here will be 0 and continue until the CLK2. The value for the CLK2 is still the same because the J is 0 and K is 1. So it will be 0 reset here. So the x here will be 0 and the dot here will be 1. So the third one is T flip-flop. So here is T flip-flop. So the value of T will be B. So the T flip-flop here has positive S triggered. So we will read the waveform on the clock on the front here. Then look at the CLK1. The value of T is 0. So from the truth table here, if the value of T is 0, so the answer will be 0. So here will be 0 and will be continue until CLK2. CLK2 here, so it will be stop here. So look at the previous one on the T waveform. So it is 1. So by based on the truth table here, if the previous one is equal to 1, so it will be toggle 1. So the answer here will be 1. Okay, so for here is D flip-flop. The D is equal to K. So the value of D here will equal to K. On the previous K, the value is 1. So the value here will be 1. And then we will be assume the early waveform here as 0. Then the clock on the D flip-flop here is positive as triggered. So we will look at the front of the CLK waveform. So if the D, so we will look at the CLK1 here. So if the D is equal to 1 here, the answer will be 1. So here will be 1. So it will continue until clock 2 here. So on the clock 2, the value of D is still equal to 1 here. So if the value of t is equal to 1, so the answer will be 1. So the answer here will be 1 and continue. So for question 3, based on figure 3.1, draw the output waveform Q and Q bar for the given input in the figure 3.1. Figure 3.1 is here. So here has the clock, pre-bar, clear bar, CLR bar. So it's mean this is a D flip-flop active low. So on the figure given, the D flip-flop is positive as triggered. So we will read the CLK waveform here from the front side. So first thing first, if the pre-bar is equal to 0, so the output will be 1. So the Q output here will be 1. So for CLR bar, so if the CLR bar is equal to 0, the output will be 0. So the CLR bar here is 0. So the output here will be 0. Okay. So the first value here is by pre-bar. So it will stick to value 1 until it reach to clock 2. So on the clock 2 here, the D value is equal to 0. So the output here will be 0. So on the clock 3 here, so the output from the clock 2 is 0. So it will continue until clock 3 here. So if the clock 3 here, on the clock 3 here, the D is equal to 1. So if the D value is 1, then the answer will be 1. So the D here is 1, so the answer here will be 1. So it will continue until the CLR bar value here. Okay, so the CLR bar here is equal to 0, so here will be 0. So it will so the CLR bar value will be continue until it reach the clock 4 here. So here on the clock 4, the D value is equal to 0. So the D value is equal to 0, the answer will be 0. So the D value here will be continue 0 until it reach the pre-bar value. So if pre-bar equal to 0, so the answer will be 1. So here will be 1 until it reach CLK5. So on the CLK5, uh, the D is equal to 0. So the answer here will be 0 and it will continue until it reach the CLR bar here value is equal to 0 too, and it will continue like that. So for the Q bar answer, it is the opposite answer from the Q1. So if the Q is equal to 1, so the Q bar will be 0. Okay, so for the question 4, analyze the operation of the register circuit in figure 4.1 for the given input waveform. Assume that the initial condition is Q3, Q2, Q1, and Q0 is equal to 0, 1, 1, 0. Construct the output waveform of the following waveform in figure 4.1. So here is figure 4.1. So we will be assume each Q3, Q2, Q1, and Q0 will be starting the waveform as 0, 1, 1, 0. Okay. From the given figure here, the figure is D latch because it not have clock. So then the function of En here is when the input is 1. So if the input is 1, the output Q follow the input. So the output Q will follow the input. Okay. So for the first one is the first one is Q0 will be follow the D0 input. So it will be 0 here. Then it will be stopped until it reach the first En. So the first En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So from the truth table here, if the En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0, so the answer will be 0. So it will continue 0 here until it reach the En2. So for the En2, the En is 1 and the D is also 1. So if the both of them is equal to 1, so the answer will be 1. So here will be 1 and continue until it reach En3. So for the En3, the En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So from based on the truth table, it will be 0. So here will be 0 and continue until reach here. So from here, the En is equal to 1 and the D is also equal to 1. So it will be 1 here. And it stop here because of the D is equal to 0. So it will drop to the 0 value. And it will continue until it reach here at the end of the En and stop here. So the value of En is equal to 0. Sorry. So the En here is equal to 1. The En here is equal to 0 and the output here for D is equal to 1. So from the based on the truth table here, so it will be continue the previous value. So here is 1. So it will continue the previous value. So for Q1, the Q1 is starting from 1. Okay. Then here the En is equal to 1. then the D is equal to 1, 2. Then the answer will be 1. So here we'll continue 1 until it reaches here for the En, the second. For the second En, so the answer for En is 1. And the D is, value of D is 0. So if the En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0, so the answer will be 0. So here it will be dropped here until it reach the third En. So if here the third En is equal to 1 and the D is also equal, the D is equal to 0. So the answer will continue 0 until it reaches the fourth En, the last En. So on the last En, the En is equal to 1 and the D is also equal to 1. So from the truth table here, if the both of them is equal to 1, so it will be the answer will be 1. So here will be 1 until it reaches here, the D. The D is dropped here. So the D is dropped here. So the D is become 0 and the En is equal to 1. So the answer will be 0. So it will continue until at the end of the En here. So the En is equal to 0 and the D is equal to 0 also. So from the based on the truth table here, it will continue the previous value. So it will continue the previous value. So for the Q2, the waveform will starting with 1. So it will continue 1 until it reach the first En. The first En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So based on the table, the answer will be 0 and the answer will drop here to 0 and it will continue until it reach the first En. So on the first En, the both D and En is equal to 1. So the answer will be 1. So it will go here to 1 and until it reach the third En. So on the third En, the En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So it will drop here to 0 and it goes until the fourth En. So on the fourth En, the En still the same is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So it will continue the D and it will continue the answer until it reaches here because of the D is equal to 1 and also the En is equal to 1. So the answer will be 1. So here it continue go to 1 until it reaches the end of the En here because the En dropped to 0 here. So if the En is equal to 0 and the D is equal to 1, so we will continue the previous answer. So the previous answer is 1. So it will continue to value of 1. So for the Q3 will be starting with 0 value. Then we will continue 0 until it reaches the first En. So the first En is equal to 1 and the D is equal to 0. So the answer will be 0. So the answer of 0 will be continue until it reaches here because the second En is also the En is 1 and the D is 0. So there is the same value from the first En. So it will be continue until it reaches the third En. So on the third En, the value of En is 1 and the value of D is 1. So the answer will be 1. So here the En suddenly drop to 0. So the D is equal to 1. So based on the truth table, if the En is equal to 0 and the D is equal to 1, so the answer will be continue from the previous one. So the answer will be continue until it reach the end because here the En is equal to 1 and the D is also equal to 1. So the answer will be 1. So here the En is equal to 0 and the D is equal to 1. So the answer will be continue from the previous one is 1. So that's all from me. Thank you.